How's it going, guys? Honkai Star Rail has been out for just a little over a day, and we have a video here from 1010. It says Honkai Star Rail has a major problem. So we're going to react to it and see what he's talking about. See if you guys feel the same.
Honkai Star Rail is an upcoming game developed by the same developers as Genshin Impact, Hoyoverse, and it's meant to be a continuation on the Honkai universe, or as they would call it, the Hoyoverse. I was very fortunate to be granted beta access to the earlier closed beta test of Honkai Star Rail, which, while it was really fun at first, very quickly it appeared that there is a major, massive problem with the brand new system of Honkai Star Rail that will lead me to turn away from this game, and unfortunately, ultimately, this is not a game that I'll be playing on its release. Let's talk about Honkai Star Rail's biggest problem. Just as a quick disclaimer though, this is not a video meant to bash on the game, but rather just to explain my experience with the closed beta test of Honkai Star Rail. In fact, I have never been a big fan of turn-based combat like Final Fantasy or Persona. And that
so this is purely opinionated. He's just not a big fan of turn-based combat. And I kind of brought this up the other day that I don't know, like it feels like turn-based combat will get tired really fast. Do you know what I mean? Especially with the fact that there's an auto feature too. I mean, you might as well be watching TV. I'm concerned with if there will be some longevity to this style of game.
Could probably be a major reason that led me away from playing Honkai Star Rail, as I have always been a bigger fan of action RPG game like Sekiro. miHoYo in the past has developed a bunch of characters that people really love and enjoy in their past title like Honkai Impact or Genshin Impact, and the Honkai Star Rail universe does have really enjoyable and lovable character as well. So if that's something that's exciting you, I highly encourage you to give the game a try. I did have a lot of fun when I first started playing the game, it just wasn't for me after a couple hours, but the game is free to play after all, so it is free for you to try it out. This is not an ad, but most importantly, please don't spend money that you can't afford. It is still a gacha game at the end of the day, and be careful with your addiction. Let's talk about my problem. The main thing that I want to uncover today is Honkai Impact's combat system, aka the turn-based system. In this game, you assemble a party of 4 members, usually with some kind of DPS, healer, support, and you take turn acting facing against the enemy. At the very top left of the screen, you can observe what we call the action list. This indicates what turn it is and which character is available to act. And you effectively just take turn between your characters and the enemy characters to attack each other. Some characters have faster attack speed that potentially allow them to attack twice before the enemy is able to. But you get the general idea. You just kind of go off one after another. When it comes down to your turn, each character basically have 2 available actions. You can either perform a basic attack, which generate you a skill point indicated by this star here, or you can consume a skill point across your team to cast their signature skill instead, which is the button smaller on the right side of the screen.
I mean, to be fair, I think he's putting it pretty bluntly. I think there is a tad more intricacies involved in the Honkai Star Rail combat system, more than he's implying, but he might go over them here in just a minute, so let's see.
In addition to that, every character also have a signature ability, kind of like an elemental burst from Genshin Impact, which you can use anytime your energy is full. This ability do not cost you a turn and can be casted anytime, so you kind of just cast them whenever they're off cooldown or whenever they're recharged. There's also kind of an elemental system in the game, kind of denoted by the character's colors, but unlike Genshin Impact where doing reactions is a thing, elements in this game are really just counter.
Again, I think he just kind of brushed over the combat system. I think once you start playing it and you get a feel for the combat system and you realize the synergies between the characters, it does get a bit more intricate and it's not just as blunt as that. But I do understand what he's saying.
Counter element. They're just meant to break shield. Most of the time, enemy will have a shield indicated by the white bar on top of their head, but alongside that will be a couple elements that counter that enemy. And basically, instead of trying to create elemental reaction with your characters, you want to match your element with the same colors on the enemy to do bigger shield damage to their enemy. For example, this enemy here has a red colors on top of their head, indicating that they're weaker to pyro element. In this case, casting a pyro attack onto them will do bigger shield damage, which likelier to stagger them and break their poise. That's the basic idea of Honkai Star Rail's combat. Again, it resembles a lot like traditional turn-based game like either certain Final Fantasy titles or Persona. Again, turn-based game has never really been.
Yeah, I mean, he went over all the combat has to offer, but I think a lot of players will find when they actually get involved in the combat, it is a bit more intricate in the sense that in in the order in which you do these things is important, and it adds another layer.
In my thing, and I've always been more like action RPG, so that would be one of the biggest turn away I have when it comes down to those titles, including Honkai Star Rail, and might be potentially for you as well. But on the other hand, if you really enjoyed the turn-based aspect about Final Fantasy or Persona, maybe you'll really enjoy Honkai Star Rail as well.
This might be a hot take, and people might get upset about this, but I think turn-based style fighting combat is a thing of the past. It's like ancient technology now. It was super popular in the fucking 90s and the early, 2000s when Final Fantasy was still doing that. But even Final Fantasy, the originators, like the kings of turn-based combat, are turning away from that in their newer games. They're moving on from it. Who is it? Square Enix. They've kind of caught on to the idea that it's like it's a thing of the past, man. It was good then, and I don't think it's as good now. Now, I'm not saying I'm not a fan of turn-based combat. I grew up playing Final Fantasy, so I completely understand. But even playing Honkai Star Rail now, like I said, I brought up some concerns yesterday in yesterday's stream about the longevity of the turn-based combat. Like I feel like it might get tired really fast. So hot take, I think turn-based combat is kind of old news.
To be very fair, despite me knowing that I don't really enjoy turn-based combat, I actually did have a lot of fun when I first started playing Honkai Star Rail. My first couple hours was super amazing. Exploring the world, exploring about these characters, learning about these characters' stories and background was really exciting. These characters...
He didn't mention that you could skip enemy turns with Youll. Yeah, true.
Have a really great personality and aesthetic that quickly captured my heart. But again, the main problem is that after I played it for a couple hours, this game just insanely suddenly felt super repetitive and boring that instantly turned me away. And that is the big problem that I want to talk about in this.
I disagree with him. I've been playing it for, I don't know, I've probably got like 10 hours logged now. I don't think it's boring yet, but like I said, I can feel it coming though.
Video. So what is this so sudden change that turned me away so quickly? What is this big problem that I'm talking about? And it's the fact that Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based game with 2 buttons. The problem is that on each turn,
I do agree with
either
this.
Choose one or the other available action.
I do agree with this. I think it would be, rather than the basic attack, the skill, and the ult, if there was a couple more options, I think it would help.
You have a total of 2 choices. You can either do a basic attack, or if you have a skill point, you can choose to instead spend a skill point to do your signature skill instead. There's absolutely no other decision-making process in the game. There's absolutely no other available action in the game. You don't really get to choose when your turn goes. You kind of just follow the action list, and your elemental burst or your signature ability doesn't really have a decision-making process either. Since
I don't know. Again, I don't think he's necessarily explaining it properly, because there are ways to manipulate when you attack and when the opponent attacks, and I don't think he's really going over that enough.
It doesn't consume a turn, so you can just cast it whenever they're off cooldown. There's no such thing as, oh, I'm gonna save my turn for the signature ability. And effectively, you're just gonna be pressing the 2 button, one or the other, the entire time, over and over and over. It might be on different characters, It might be a little different depending on how you want to combo, how the turn is going. But in general, your decision comes down to either pressing the button on the left or the button on the right. Games like Final Fantasy or Persona.
I mean, hey, he is right there. And I think the point that he's about to make is like, in Final Fantasy games, there are more options because you can skill those specific characters into learning certain types of magic. So there's like more of a skill tree in a sense in some of those other games, is the point I think he's about to make.
Have dramatically more action that you can take. There's a lot more choices when it comes down to what action you're gonna do. When it comes down to your turn, you can either chain up a combo with one of your 10 many available skills, 20 available skills.
I've never played this game, so I don't know.
An item to buff up your character for the next turn. In fact, even if we take a look at Pokemon, which only really have 4 action at the time with each Pokemon, there's still a lot more that go on in Pokemon. There's the concept of, hey, let me take a turn to switch my Pokemon out so that it will be more advantageous the next turn. There's the idea of, let me cast a buff right now so that I can do a bigger attack the next turn. Maybe there is even the idea of using...
No, there's that in Honkai as well. You can buff with Bronya, hold his character ahead in the timeline to attack.
item consumable to revive a Pokemon a little bit, again, consume your next turn. In Honkai Star Rail, none of these concepts exist. It's always either you press a button on the left or you press a button on the right.
No, I mean, yeah, he's wrong. I'm sorry, 1010. That's not completely accurate. Like I see what you're saying. It is pretty blunt. There's two buttons and an ult, but there's manipulation involved, and I don't think you're going over it.
To even simplify it a little bit more for you, the button on the right, aka your character's ability, costs a skill point, and you can only cast it when you have a skill point. And of course, casting it doesn't generate your skill point. And your decision actually gets simplified even more because you want to save your skill point for those ability when you need them, either a offensive ability or a defensive ability. So it pretty much comes down to, do I want to cast a basic attack because I don't have the skill point right now and generate a skill point, or I have the skill point available to me and therefore I just want to.
He didn't play the game enough. Hey, I want to make it clear, 1010. I'm not trying to start any beef with you. I'm just reacting to your video, man, and giving my own opinion. And there are some things I think you're missing out on.
Cast my signature ability.
Apparently my chat thinks so too.
To give you a little bit of example, one of the things that you can potentially do is like, hey, my healer needs to heal because my team is low, so let me basic attack on my DPS characters to generate a skill point, so that when it comes down to my healer's turn, I can use their healing ability. And in the reverse, if your team is not low and your healer doesn't need to heal, then what you could do is basic attack on your healer to generate a skill point for your DPS, and then cast the ability on your DPS to do more damage. That is basically the
okay. He kind of brushed over it there a little bit, right? He didn't necessarily go over manipulating the attack time and things like that, but he did kind of add another layer of depth to the combat by explaining that there, I guess. But
entire game, your decision pretty much comes down to a flow chart with two methods of path. If you need heal, you just cast the basic attack on your DPS, save skill point for your healer, cast the healer ability. If you don't need heal, cast the ability on your DPS to do more damage, cast the basic attack on your healer to generate a skill point. That is the entire game played out for you.
No, I don't. I mean, in a very, very simplistic sense, he's correct, but there's more depth involved.
Entire combat of the game can basically be simplified and explained onto a two-dimensional flowchart in one sentence, and it all is because this game only have two available action at a time. Again, either the button on the left or the button on the right, aka either you do your basic attack or you do your ability. And if you happen to have your elemental burst or your signature ability up, just cast it off cooldown, whatever. And it's exactly that reason why the game feels super repetitive after a couple hours, and why it was fun the first initial couple hours. When you're still exploring the game, when you're still coming up with your strategy, when you're still learning what to do, you don't really see this problem because you haven't learned all of it yet. You're still trying to figure it out, and it was kind of fun doing that. But once you have figured it out, after your third hour, it's just always the same formula over and over and over and over and over and over and again. Button on left, button on right, button on left, button on right, whatsoever.
No.
The fact that Honkai
I'm sorry, 1010. So check it out. I've played the game for 10 hours. I do feel it, and I do worry that it will get tired very fast because it is turn-based combat. Again, I don't think you're going over the manipulation of how you can manipulate the timeline and skip enemies' turns with ults. And Bronya is a great example. You can pull other characters ahead to attack first. Things like this. You could preemptively heal, and I don't necessarily know that you went over that because you could look at the timeline and see that an enemy is going to attack, preemptively heal, or pre-buff, whatever it is, right? But also, I've played the game for 10 hours, right? And I've only used like 4 characters. I've only used 4 characters, and I've only messed around with the synergies between them alone in 10 hours, right? So this isn't even considering that I've yet to even get other characters that I want to try out some of their synergies between the others. I think the game has a little bit more longevity than you're implying.
Star Rail only have 2 available action at the time, means you can't really come up with a strategy that's really different than the others. Your strategies pretty much come down to the same all the time. Which brings me to the next problem. If strategy is not what actually wins you the battle in a turn-based combat, what actually do matter? The answer is
it is. No. I disagree. I think strategy does play into this because I'm terrible at the game, right? And I can't beat a boss in World 1 of the simulation. I have viewers in my chat who are lower level than me who have beat it. So that comes down to I think, skill and the order in which you use your attacks. So I mean, I'm not saying you're completely wrong because stats play huge into it. You're 100% right there. But again, I think you're missing a few key things.
Stats and only stats. A strategy doesn't really matter anymore since you only have 2 buttons and it's the same thing again and again. The only thing that determines if you win or lose is if you have higher stat than the enemy or if the enemy have higher stat than you. Which
I do
means
think
this game is
I do think he's right in a sense. I do think this will be the case in the late game. In the late game, when you're just super overpowered, I don't think it's going to matter, and it's just going to be stats. I do agree there, but like earlier game with some of these bosses, like they're not necessarily the easiest thing, right? I would say Genshin is easier because you can just kind of go in and fucking do all of your things and do all of your bursts in a row and everything's dead, right? So I don't necessarily I agree with what you're saying, but I don't agree with what you're saying. You know what I mean?
insanely stat checky and is absolutely super pay to win. This is one of the biggest things when it comes down to turn-based game, is that when you hit your ability, you just do that amount of damage. Always, with no exception. Turn-based game in general are very stat checky because you can't really miss an ability. Maybe sometimes there's RNG factor that you have to play around, but in general, if you press the button, you expect it to do the thing, and it probably is gonna do the thing, which just overall results in the game being really stat checky. With Honkai Star Rail only having 2 buttons and it being a gacha game and it being like super grindy with the artifact system, it really worried me how pay to win the game will be, especially for an end game. Oftentimes when you lose to a battle, it feels like you would just understat it for the battle rather than because you employed the wrong strategies. With Honkai,
I do agree with him here. I do worry about the end game because of those reasons.
Star Rail being a gacha game, it means that character acquisition will be much more difficult compared to traditional turn-based game, again like Final Fantasy or Persona, because instead of assembling a team to create a strategy that you like, sometimes you might just be missing key component or key characters because you couldn't gacha for them, you couldn't afford for them, or the gacha god just didn't really like you, and therefore you completely fail to implement that strategy that someone else might be running. The biggest culprit of this in the beta was Seela, who is the feature's 5-star characters, who is ridiculously overpowered and can just solo the entire enemy team by herself despite being a single target carry because her speed was so high and she has a passive that let her attack again if she killed an enemy. The Seela strategy in the beta test was so dominant because you can just take, let's say, 8 to even 9 attack in a row, and I swear.
Okay, well then you have to take that into consideration. If you were playing with Seela and she is extremely overpowered and she's able to attack multiple times, having a powerful character like that is going to make the game feel more dull to you, right?
Someone out there did a 11 attack combo on Seela alone, so the enemy never get a turn attack. Why give the enemy a turn attack if you can just attack again and again and again and again and again and again and again? But of course, this is only possible if you either spend money to roll for the feature's 5-star character Seela, or you got really lucky or you saved up a lot of currency over time. And with that being said, there's no way you're gonna ever get every single character without spending. So eventually, you're gonna run into this problem with potentially the next feature's 5-star characters, or maybe the one after that. Honkai Star Rail in many ways implement the exact same system as Genshin Impact when it comes down to its gacha. There's like pity, there's like 50-50, whatever. You get the idea if you're coming from Genshin Impact. AKA, it is not really generous. But
it's the same gacha system. It sucks, yeah. I mean,
most important is that you can always roll for a duplicate of the character to continuously evolve those characters, aka Constellation. And the thing about Honkai Star Rail being a turn-based game is that Constellation always simply comes down to one thing. It improves your character stats. Either it allows you to do more things, attack more target, it does more damage, and stuff like that. There's no Constellation that changes how the character is played because it is a turn-based game. Again, playstyle comes down to pressing the button on the left or pressing the button on the right. So every Constellation just become this character do more things, more damage, more utility, more area coverages, and that's it. Which means the game overall is insanely pay to win. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you can't enjoy Honkai Star Rail as a completely free to play. In fact, you could enjoy Genshin Impact for the most part being a complete free to play because of free to play friendly character like Xiangling. I haven't covered all the other aspect about Honkai Star Rail, you know, the artifact farming, the resins or the energy systems, the end game like simulated universe. But ultimately, I think the fundamental fundamental of Honkai Star Rail is just flawed. The fact that it is a turn-based game with 2 buttons overall just mean that the game will always revolve around concept like that, being the same thing over and over and being insanely stat checky. And that is the reason why this is a big problem for me, and maybe even for you to worry about when it comes down to Honkai Star Rail. It's because fundamentally speaking, the game is just flawed. I get that they're trying to make the game as easy as possible for many players to get and enjoy. This is the formula that kind of worked for them for Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is a super easy game to get into. It is super casual friendly. So maybe they want to replicate the success with a turn-based game in Honkai Star Rail by making it as easy as possible for most players to enjoy. And again, maybe you will still enjoy the game and the game is free to play, so you can still try out the game, and maybe you'll like it and disregard everything I say in this video. But for me, who has always been looking for those action RPG, higher level of content, min-maxing, endgame, Honkai Star Rail just isn't really for me. And for that reason, I won't be playing Honkai Star Rail. And that's really it. And with that being said, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe as always, and I'll see you guys next time.
Hey, 1010, that's a good video, man. You know, you were at least very clear in the sense that this is how you feel about turn-based combat style games. And you know what? I'm not, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think turn-based style games, they're not nearly as fun as open world RPGs like Genshin or Wuthering Waves, right? And I do have some concerns in the sense that I do think Honkai Star Rail will get old, but I also do think you missed a couple key factors in there, explanations as far as the combat goes and things like that. And still though, solid video, man. No beef with you. I'm a fan, obviously. And I hope you're okay with me reacting to this. So yeah, if you guys like this video, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up, smashing that subscribe button, and let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below if you agree with 1010 or if you disagree with him. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.